Don't attack me on the title here. There are two hosts, and we have two different opinions on this. But do you think it's worth having kids or not? Let me know in the comments and enjoy the episode. See you on the other side. Watch and or listen while we tackle tough and sometimes taboo topics filmed live over drinks. This platform allows us to articulate our thoughts and challenge our beliefs. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy. All right, here we go. We're talking about childless cat ladies. This is episode 254 of SipTalk podcast. My name is Justin DiGiulio, joined by James, the Boswell, philosopher, philanderer, philanthropist. I'm out of PH words. What am I missing? Philatelist, phlebotomist.
Yeah, sure.
Phlebotomy license, I understand you could do probably in a couple of weeks, right?
Maybe.
All right. Well, again, we were talking about childless cat ladies. Actually, this week we were talking about.
I mean, I would imagine if you go down the right street in New York City, you can find plenty of amateur phlebotomists.
Oh yeah, it's easy to find a vein any block in Midtown. Tonight we are talking about whether it is worth having kids or not. And really, there's been a few kind of national press headlines about the rapidly declining birth rates. I don't really think it's new news, but for some reason it's been trending. The rapidly declining birth rates in the United States and other developing nations.
Well, I think part of it is that you've got a number of figures mostly on the right that are talking about birth rate declines as a problem. Like J.D. Vance is on tape talking about like people need to be having more kids and criticizing the Democrats for being run as a party of childless cat ladies.
Well, hold on, real
Elon
quick.
Musk is running his mouth all the time about like people needing to like have more kids. So like it's not just the news covering it more, but like you're seeing conversations in the right wing spheres about it as well.
Well, let's draw. It's early enough in the conversation, and we, I hate getting political because I really like walking that middle line. But let's draw the political line on population and having children. So I think what you just said is Republicans are afraid of this falling birth rate and are pro having children. They're also anti-abortion, right? Whereas on the liberal end, on the Democratic end, there's a lot of concern with overpopulation, lack of resources, global warming, and pro-choice, the ability to have an abortion if you feel that you need or want an abortion.
Well,
and
I just want to add one other like caveat to this, which is that I don't think that on the liberal side of things that liberal politics is against people having children.
I don't think it's against people having children, but there is a concern on the left of population, overpopulation, resources, and generally they recognize overpopulation as a problem. Whereas on the right side, you got like Jordan Peterson and Trump saying that we should have more children, and that's scary for the left.
Well, it's not scary for the left in like the idea by itself of people having more children isn't scary to the left. And I'm gonna say as the leftist on this cast, what and we'll get into this as we go through the topic.
We have a pretty cool. I really think we're going to have a cool conversation. I got to ask you before we get too deep into the conversation. You have a drink over there?
P beer.
Is that PBR?
Yeah.
All right. I got a Canadian Club, which has been my go-to. I'm hoping they're going to sponsor us one of these days.
Oh, that'd be great.
Otherwise, I'm going to have to switch to something more expensive. And production has actually decided I need to be limited to just 1 or 2 glasses per episode. So I'm going to try to abide by that. But considering that I am production, after 1 or 2 glasses, my decision may change on that.
So let me state the liberal position on kids.
Well, do you speak for all liberals?
Yes. Yeah, they've elected.
I think I actually know what you're about to say, so go ahead.
Well, so the liberal position on kids is that people should be able to make the choice as to whether or not they want to have kids. And like abortion access is a positive because it allows people to have choice over when they have kids and how many, because having a kid at the wrong time in your life can have really devastating consequences for your quality of life and the child that you have. And so liberals say, yes, we should be encouraging people to have children. And what we need to do is put systems in place that make it more palatable in today's society to have children. Whereas and the liberal criticism of conservatives' positions would be, you're asking people to have more children, yet a lot of the systems and social welfare programs that are designed to help people that have children, you're looking to dismantle. So you're looking to prevent people from having abortion and basically forcing people to have kids when they may not want to. And if we want to encourage kids, instead of forcing people to have kids, we should make the choice to have kids more appealing.
So I will agree with you on most of that, except that you kind of generalized the conservative approach that they want to demolish and abolish these programs. I think, and again, playing devil's advocate because I'm more left of center, but I'm pretty close to center. That the conservative approach is not let's abolish these programs, but the approach is really let's look at the programs. Most of them are terrible. So
Well, I would disagree with that.
you may disagree, but somebody who's on the other side of the line, not even that distant over the border, is going to say these are really lousy programs. Let's figure out better programs. And also, we don't like this kind of blanket welfare, right? Like the Republicans for many years are saying, yeah, we're not against welfare, but we want welfare with drug checks. And then the ultra liberal is like, well, people are driven in this kind of the life that they're living are driven to drugs. So because their life is so bad, we need to allow them to do drugs and do these programs because life is so bad. So conservatives aren't saying demolish the programs blindly. They're saying these programs suck. Let's make them better. So that's
I would
kind of
disagree with that. At least in Project 2025, they're looking to like defund a lot of like the pre-K and early start programs.
which is wild because also conservatives really just want to spend more on defense and, and military, and then just
Yeah.
keep on this
But
shit
look,
a hell of a lot.
let's get more into the like the
Yeah,
topic at
let's
hand
let's
because we're
start
a
chewing.
little bit.
Let's take some bites of the steak.
All right. So I start off my outline with the following quote: "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the result." And that's from Charlie Munger, a Nobel laureate economist.
What was the subject? What was the context?
No context is needed. He was saying, if you want to explain behavior, because like he was a like microeconomist and economist and like focused on like human behavior economies, not macroeconomics where you're looking at like long run aggregate supply curves
So,
and stuff like
so
that.
on that note, show me the incentive for having children. There's a weird here's where having children doesn't exactly fit into a an economic model because people don't have children for the reward. Some people do.
Well,
Some
hold on.
people plan having children,
Can we
but
go back? Can I just touch on that point a little bit?
sure,
Which
but I
is
really want to get that statement out. So if you allow me to get back there.
finish. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that, the simple economics would say that people take an action for a specific reward, right? So having sex to have children, having children to have this. But really what happens is people don't have sex to have children, they have sex to fuck. Okay. And then they have children, right? And that's where
Well,
the
that's the way it
economic
worked for a while.
that's where the economic model doesn't quite hold up. And
Well,
and especially in developing nations where there's less access to birth control, people are having sex to fuck. They're not having sex to have children. Having children is is an effect of having sex, but it's not the reason to have sex for most people,
Well, I would say with the
especially
show
these
me
days.
incentive and I'll show you the result. If you look at like falling birth rates in countries, and we'll get to this later in terms of the actual numbers, but you can look at where people have the choice, have more of a choice about whether they're going to have a kid. You can look at the incentives that are at play in that society and draw correlations as to why they have a higher or lower birth rate. But anyways, I look at it as, if like for me, and my whole argument for the next 45 minutes is
Mhm.
going to be that the incentives to have kids are far outweighed by the costs.
So are you speaking strictly of the financial cost of having children?
That's one of many reasons.
All right. So do you want me to address that, or do you want to get into that in a separate line item here?
Well, let me hit my economic points real quick.
All right. Let's hit one economic point at a time.
Okay. So the first one, if you live in the US, um, from 2023, the USDA data, the estimate is that to raise a child from 0 to 18 is approximately $332,000.
Hmm.
And that's on average. So, you can go higher or lower, but this is a government statistic and it's an average. And 332,000 is a lot of money.
I just calculated my lifetime coffee spend at Starbucks, and that's not accounting for inflation, and it's $62,400. So if a kid only costs 5 times as much as a daily cup of coffee, that doesn't sound that bad.
My lifetime Starbucks expenditure is probably, I would be surprised if it were three digits.
So, I mean, 60 something thousand dollars for a daily Starbucks, and that's not daily. I didn't account for
Yeah,
holidays.
but that probably also accounts for you buying like gift cards for employees and all sorts of other
No,
stuff.
I said I spend $6 a day on a large coffee, which is, by the way, black iced coffee, times 5 days, times 52, times 40 years, and I could consider that a lifetime
Yeah,
Starbucks.
but you didn't drink. It's probably more like 25, not 40.
Well, I don't know, but that's also not accounting for inflation. But either way, you're looking at 40,000 or 60 something thousand, whereas you consider my lifetime Starbucks consumption to just being 1/5 of what it costs to raise a kid. Raising a kid by comparison doesn't sound that bad. $332,000 is not something to you know.
That 332,000 doesn't count anything for college or anything else. That's just to get them to like legal adulthood
Well, here's
and
something I
assuming
thought
that they're
about.
100% on their own at after that point. So in
So
reality that 332 is probably higher, but I would just want to run with the 0 to 18 figure at 332K.
So we want to say
That's a
hi
lot of
to
money.
Robert Torres in Ecuador. I'm curious what the estimated lifetime cost of carrying a child is. But I'll tell you something. So we don't talk about my personal life that much in this podcast. We don't talk about personal life that much. But I have a child. I wanted to have a child before having a child. I love having a child. I'd like to have another child. Um, you don't have any children, and you don't want any children. Um, every once in a while in the last few months, it's come up in conversation actually about the cost of feeding a kid. And I just remember, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and not even talking about the topic of this podcast. I was talking about how my mom would come home back in the late 90s, early 2000s with groceries. And she would have spent like $200 on groceries. Nowadays, my guess is that would be about $400 in groceries because the grocery inflation has increased a lot. And I remember like she would come home with these granola bars and I'd have gone like out for a run and already worked out in the day. And I'd eat like the entire box of granola bars. And like the next day, my mom would be like, "What happened to the granola bars?" I was like, "Oh, I ate them yesterday." And she goes, "What do you mean ate them? You ate like all of them, or you like partook in eating some of them?" I'm like, "No, I ate the whole box." And like literally, she'd buy $200 for the groceries, and I would eat $90 worth. I'd almost eat 50% of the groceries within the first 2 days. There's been a lot of complaints about grocery costs. I'm agreeing with you on this statement. There's been a lot of complaints about food costs and grocery costs. When you have children, they consume, especially at certain points in their life, more than adults do calorically.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah,
Well, two questions since we need to give some background to the audience. Roughly how old is your kid at this point?
he's just under 2 years old.
Okay.
So he's not eating an entire box of granola bars. I don't know if you
No,
can eat
but
granola under
I
2
would
years.
imagine that you've had to buy formula, you've had to buy baby food.
Oh, and that so let's talk about formula and baby food. I had no idea. So I've done pretty well financially. I really don't think about I don't look at I go grocery shopping, I don't look at the bill. I go to a restaurant, I don't look at the bill. Um, I go to the store and buy what I need to buy. I don't look at the bill. Every once in a while, I'll see it because I just know I can afford it, right? If I go to the store, I buy a pair of pants and a shirt or something. I don't really like. I might, in passing, kind of look at it, but I know it's generally X number of dollars. A few years ago, I went shopping just to get a few things to cook one meal, and um, I got one grocery bag full of things, and it was like $80. And I looked at the receipt, and a pack of butter was $12. Now, apparently, for some reason, it should have been like $3, but I was just surprised. Uh, but since then, I started paying attention to grocery costs, and um, when you have a child, grocery costs go up quite a bit, and the markup on baby food is insane. So to buy basically 4 small containers of baby food potion, it's like $108. Are you frozen or are you still?
No, I am doing a calculation on my phone because I'm looking at some of the comments, and Caitlin Taylor says that their grocery bill is about $900 a month for a family of four. Um, so let's assume 10 years, so that's 120 months. Um, all right, so $900 a month payment, $136,000.
Yeah.
That's using a 4.5% interest discount rate. So like, there's an interest play here, but that's a lot of money, man. And like, let me ask you this, because like the formula of the baby food, like, but let's talk
I
about
mean,
all
I
the costs that
look,
you've
the
had
the
to.
baby food costs way more than protein powder. Like, that was protein powder is expensive as fuck. Anybody who works out who uses protein powder knows it's like $60 for a big container of it, or even more. It can be like $100 for a big container of it.
But let
The
me
baby
ask you
food
this.
was way more expensive.
So for your your kid's almost 2 years old. So how much do you think that you spent in the past 2 years on baby food, diapers, healthcare, childcare,
Uh,
clothing,
well, I mean, the daycare alone.
entertainment, toys, altogether? How much do you and
I'm
also,
not I'm not equipped. I just because my brain doesn't remember things or think of things. But the daycare alone costs about 20 grand a year, and it's not a phenomenal. It's a very good daycare, um, but it's like not some type of Montessori specialty daycare. It's just kind of your run of the mill daycare. We happen to find a really good one with great staff, good teachers. It's 20 grand a year.
all right, so that's 20 grand a year. So I would say over 2 years, that's $40,000 right there.
Very, very good at math.
And you're probably looking at, I would say, between doctor's appointments to make sure that he's still healthy and stuff like that, and when he gets sick, and the food and everything else.
Where are you
I
going?
think a reasonable assumption
The
would
kids
be
are
that you've
expensive.
probably spent somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 in 2 years.
No, probably, and insurance covers some of it, but like you'd be surprised. Like a trip to the emergency room, for some reason, the insurance changed, and the emergency room prices went up, and we ended up in the emergency room a couple of times. I think it was like $300 or $600 as the copay just to go to the emergency room. Um,
Here, I want to hit some of these
well,
comments because we
yeah, I
got
want to
a
hit
we
some
got a bunch
comments. I
of
want to move
comments we
on,
can
and
hit.
also I want to defend the economics of having a child in a minute. But I'm really interested in hearing your point. But point is, you're talking about how goddamn expensive it is. But literally everything is fucking expensive these days. So,
Right, but if everything's expensive and I have limited funds, why am I going to put those funds towards something that
and this is why I
doesn't
have
have
to.
any
This is
economic
why.
benefit to me?
This is why you, as my friend, I often have your back when people are saying, "Oh, James, you just need to have a child. It'll be all right. Life won't change that much." I will tell you, life will definitely fucking change. And
We're gonna get to that too.
and kids are not cheap. After you're making a certain point, I mean, I always imagined I was much better financially off uh, a few years ago, and I had a big company. And at that point in time, I just always assumed when I had a child, I'd be able to afford in-home care and somebody to stay overnight and watch the kid, and I'd be able to parent on my time. But
Look,
really,
we got a lot of comments rolling in. Let's
all right,
address some of them.
let's hit some of these comments. I'll let
All
you
right.
read them.
So on the food thing, so Heather Mickelson says like our son eats us out of the house. So yeah, like especially if you've got like a teenager or something, like teenage boys eat a crap load. Um, like um, Leah Hussein says that it's at least $600 a month for theirs. Ilana Carvajal says the title is harsh of like, do you want to have kids or you want to be happy? Like,
I'm trying to raise some eyebrows there.
yeah, I mean, to me, like it's virtually impossible to me to imagine a life where I simultaneously have a kid and am happy. So
Well, I have
Um,
a child and I'm happy, and I'm happy. A lot of my happiness comes from having the kid. I
and
think
all
I
right,
think
real
all the
quick.
parents, Caitlin, Ilani, Leah, Heather, would all agree that they would not trade in their child for the $60,000.
All right, so Caitlin, I want to respond to this one because this is actually a really fair comment. So Caitlin says, "I'm not saying that you have to have kids. By all means, don't have them if you don't want them, but don't make the decision solely based on money."
And that's kind of the point that I was going to make. And I think so. Look, listen, as a counterpoint to your point, is kids are fucking expensive. That's your point. Kids are expensive. We can quantify it. I mean, listen, we could build on these numbers, and we're just talking like annual numbers,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you came out with a lifetime number. I thought it was pretty low, and I compared it to a daily cup of coffee. But the cost is high to have kids. The cost is also high to have a nice car and a nice house and nice things.
Yeah, I can sell the nice car if times get tough. Like it's a lot harder to sell a kid. Not impossible,
But you could also go on you
but
could go on welfare, and you could do these types of things.
but
Um,
but
but
that
hear me out, just
hold on,
allow me to make
wait. Let me address this real quick because you said go on welfare, and I'm not going to shit on people on welfare, but what I am going to say is if I have a certain quality of life that that I've become accustomed to by not having kids, and my resources and income is limited, and having kids is going to detract from the lifestyle that I have become accustomed to, that is a major downgrade in my quality of life.
well,
By
that's
having
why
a kid, I will have a worse life because I will no longer be able to afford things that I like.
well, you're making a kind of short-sighted argument, and I'll continue to make the argument for you, but I wanna fill in the other side of that, is that when you have now a partner who brings income to the table, then it's not just on your dime. However, and now I'm going to continue to make your argument, is that you have
Okay,
to have a two person income to be able to sustain having a child, and both of you have to have real jobs where you get parental paid leave so
all
that
right.
one of you can actually have a child.
I'm going to touch on both of those things later on in my arguments. But Caitlin
So
says, then
Caitlin,
make more money. And I was like, damn, I wish I had thought of that.
um, but that is an option. You know,
No, it's like,
it can be an option. So listen,
not
I
always.
want to what Caitlin just said is that money isn't everything. And here's the thing: the way that I look at it is, if you are somebody who wants to family plan and decide you are ready to have a child, you have to comprehend. And a lot of people don't do this, and then have to figure it out as they're going. But you have to comprehend the cost. I will tell you, I didn't comprehend what the cost would be to have a kid. I'm like, wow, this is actually more expensive than I thought it would be.
I mean,
Um,
that's basically your approach with anything financial.
yes, yeah, because I'm really bad with money. Um, my solution is just make more money, which is literally what Caitlin just said. And you're like, that can't be done. I'm like, no, you'd be surprised. It can be done. Just got to work harder or smarter. But if you decide that you want to have children because you see the value in having children, we're going to talk in a minute about the value of having children.
And this is going to be where we diverge the most.
Well, agreed, but you are paying for a different life. And the way that I look at children is that the economics, I mean, I always wanted to have 7 children that just moved kind of across the globe, and I could just go and crash at their place once I was retired. Like, I didn't have to have a
Like
place.
have
I
franchises.
could just, yeah, basically overstay my welcome here, move on to the next, overstay my welcome there. I didn't have to worry about retirement or, paying a mortgage or buying food, because they'd just be so happy to see
So you just be professionally homeless.
me. Well, yeah, professional is right, because it would have been well planned.
All right. So real
Right,
quick,
right.
my view is like that there are major costs to having like disincentives, major costs to having kids, and
Bring
it's going to
your next,
require significant sacrifices on your own part in terms of your quality of life to support that kid.
hit your next point.
All
Uh,
right, real quick, like
because I think that's, you go back to the agrarian age. I think that's a really
yeah, it's so, like back when like everybody was farming, having kids was great because they were free labor. Like that doesn't really apply in the vast majority of people's lives today.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, there's much less immediate payoff, and by that we mean by the age of 8, 9, or 12 years old, that these children are able to actually perform tasks that economically reward themselves within the home or within the estate. Um, you want to have the next one here?
all right, so this one, like I can only speak to this indirectly, but like from the female point of view, like having a pregnancy is extremely risky from a health perspective.
So it's surprisingly, it became less risky and less risky and less risky over the last 3 or 4 decades. And then it kind of leveled off. And I actually think it's become more risky over the last 8 to fewer years. um, that there are very serious health risks with becoming a parent, and we've brought it down quite a bit, but there's still a pretty high risk in, and this is kind of the pro-choice uh, argument, is that having a child is very risky. You have infection, high blood pressure, preeclampsia, depression, postpartum depression, tearing during birth. Um,
And there's way more.
there's way more. Yeah, these are just your male perspective on this. I'm reading your list, by the way. Uh,
which is fine. Like,
but there, I mean, there's way more very serious issues.
and like even the less serious ones, like the ones that are just kind of accepted as normal, of like the morning sickness and the fatigue and everything else while you're physically pregnant, like those are real costs that you have to pay for 9 months while you've got a baby in you. And like that it has a
Well,
direct impact on your life.
the gestation, 9 months in terms of like the animal kingdom is a wild amount of time.
Yeah, but I
nine
just
months,
look at it as like if you're a woman, like when you get pregnant, like that's something that like you're making major sacrifices to your lifestyle
yeah.
over 9 months. Like you're not supposed to smoke, you're not supposed to drink. There's certain foods you're not supposed to eat.
You can't exercise at a certain intensity.
Intensity,
Yeah.
yeah. Like there's all sorts of lifestyle changes that you have to make to maximize your chances of
So,
healthy pregnancy.
I mean, we've been talking about this podcast episode topic for a little while, and me thinking like, man, people used to have 10, 12, 14 kids. The amount of time that you would have to like not be a real person, right? Like I mean, after kind of month like 4, you kind of had you can't even walk the same. So this is like a huge commitment, and people used to lose a greater number of pregnancies as well. So there are, I can understand, especially these days, young ladies having a great, I mean, the quality of life, everybody complains how shitty things are in 2024, but realistically, the quality of life is fucking 1,000 times better than it was 60 years ago.
Oh, completely agreed.
I mean, like people complain about like racial issues and sexism issues. Uh,
You know,
yeah,
arguably, things are better now than they ever have been.
but
I'll agree there.
basically across kind of any platform, things are way better now than they have ever been.
Yeah, does that
So
mean that there's room for improvement? Of course, but
yeah,
like, yeah, from a
I'm not
historical
discounting
perspective, we're
that.
doing well.
I'm not discounting that whatsoever.
All right, real quick, I want to hit these other like serious health risks, and this one's more from a
Serious,
male perspective.
serious. Is this a decline in sex drive? Is that
Yeah,
a serious health risk?
well,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, to it's like I've heard plenty of stories about like people in relationships where like after the woman has the kid, like she's no longer interested in like the physical aspect of the relationship.
Well, I
And
mean, here's the issue: is that it's you all of a sudden. I mean, it's. I've been having like some kind of profound moments lately. It's occurred to me. Like I looked at a banana the other day. I don't think it was banana. It was some other fruit, and I was like, "Hey, what do you?" I was like talking to a kid. I was like, "What do you think this is made out of?" And she's like, I was like 12-year-old, one of my nieces. She goes, "It's made like." I was like, "It's made out of dirt and water." All right, you put like a little seed, like a little button, you put it in the dirt, and you add water.
where are
You know
you
what?
going with this? Because it's
It's
not
made
addressing my topic at all.
it's made out of dirt and water. And then you can put like a little tiny button under the ground as well, add some water, and it turns into a fucking pineapple. Totally different. Everything's made out of dirt and water. Babies are basically a seed that are planted within your body, and it turns into like a whole you or me. Or
Hang on, I
better
want
off.
to
The
address
point is
this
that
comment.
here's my point is to have a human come out of your vagina is traumatizing. Okay.
But I,
You have a whole human come out. So to like not want somebody to put their dick inside of you for a little while, like
no, that's
I,
understandable from the female perspective.
I
I'm
can
not I'm
understand
not
how you're
shitting on
sexualized.
women for holding this viewpoint.
I
What
can
I'm
understand
saying
that.
is that if I'm a man and the physical aspect of the relationship is important to me. And here's the analogy that I read that I think really works, which is like sex in a relationship is like a bathroom in a house. When you're shopping for a house, you're not going to buy the house because it has the world's most fantastic bathroom. And it just needs to have a functional bathroom. But you would not buy a house if it had no bathroom at all. And so that's my view on on sex and relationships is like it shouldn't be the most important thing about the relationship, but if it doesn't exist in the relationship, you probably don't want that relationship. And so like I look at it as like if I'm with someone and they get pregnant and like I look at them no longer wanting to be physical with me afterwards as a real risk.
All right. So we moved through your topic, your points very slowly. I have to bring in the Bard trivia question for this week. So I really don't mean to slow you down, but I'm about to just beat you up with a bunch of my talking points. I'm going to hit them fast. You can bring your talking points in here, but I want to remind everybody who's watching us now live on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook to visit siptalkpodcast.com. Make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you visit Spotify or Apple Podcast. Subscribe to the audio podcast. You can also buy us a drink. We would greatly appreciate that if you visit siptalkpodcast.com. But I want to remind you guys of last week's Bart trivia question. And that was Clara Clater was born on December 27th, yet her birthday is always in the summer. How can that be? James? This is a pretty easy one, I feel like. This is a giveaway. I felt bad giving this question, but I liked it. I liked it because it stumped the people that I initially heard it given to.
Sorry, I was typing while you were giving that one
I
out.
know you don't pay attention. Clara Clater, born December 27th, yet every year her birthday is celebrated in the summer. How can that be?
Oh, Southern Hemisphere.
She was born in the Southern Hemisphere. That's when it happened. Um, all right. So let's get on with it. So I think, and I want to hear you argue the counterpoint to these.
Oh, I will.
Some people want to have children because they want the legacy and the continuity. They want to have an impact on the world.
All I can say to that is if that's a motivation that's important to you, I won't criticize it, but like I don't understand the appeal. Like
All right,
it
fine.
it, it it's it, you're going to hear me say this probably more than once tonight when it comes to your points about like the positive of kids, which is these are all trading in a currency that my currency exchange just doesn't accept.
I thought you, as a philosophy major, might kind of understand that having a meaning to life. All right, next,
No,
next,
because it's
next.
you're now delving into metaphysics, which I reject.
Okay, so next up is personal growth. And I think anybody who's had a child realizes you don't have the child for personal growth. A lot of people don't have children for reasons. We talked about that earlier. Like people don't plan these things; it just happens. They don't plan having sex to have children. They just get pregnant. But personal growth, people who raise children have a significant amount of personal growth. They develop patience, empathy, resilience, leadership. They develop skills that they may not have had beforehand. You're
My view is that a lot of those, if not all of those, would be accessible to someone without children if they were suitably motivated to work on it.
um, so next up, I got companionship. Children can, and I mean, you and I have talked many times in the past about, and we actually had somebody who wrote in saying the idea of kind of forcing your partner to have children for the sake of saving or building that relationship.
Hey,
Uh,
real quick, I just want to address Mabel G. Pratt says you are scaring me, and I'd like her to respond and say what are we saying that's scaring her?
yeah, Maybell, what scares you about our conversation on having children? But people have children and say they have a greater amount of companionship with their family, reduces loneliness. They have reason uh, reason to live, because they have this like people who get a pet live longer because they have this companionship with the pet.
So my response to that is I would agree that companionship is important for just a, a fulfilling life. Like there's ample research to support that. My argument would be there are cheaper and easier ways of achieving companionship than having children.
You mean like buying robots or something?
No, as in just
Check.
making friends.
Uh,
Or I don't know, like be
well,
a
here,
teacher.
I'll give you a counter
Like
argument on
do
that.
volunteer like kid
Your friend,
stuff.
the older you get, your friends will start dying. The older you get when you have children, there's a higher likeliness your children will outlive you. All right, so I'll give you another reason to have children: meaning and purpose. Many people that find that having children gives their life a deeper purpose and sense of meaning. And for me, that was big. The way that I looked at having a child was that, I could have a child probably for the next 20 years and be able to live at least through their high school, but
Well,
not.
and Sasha says plenty of kids, people with kids are in nursing homes. Their kids are never going to visit them, so it does having kids doesn't guarantee companionship. And I would agree.
Or it may not. But my thinking was, when I was living a very good life. Um, but when I turned 50, when I turned 60, when I turned 70, 80, 90 years old, what am I doing? Am I going to be doing the same shit that I'm doing when I'm 30 years old? I'm doing the same
I
shit.
hope to be.
I mean, I've spent the last 20 years of my life having a fucking blast, but I can tell you many times it gets fucking old. It gets really fucking old. And what's the greater purpose? Me going out in a fucking bender and having a blast is fun as fuck, but at the end of the day, it's like it gets old. How many sports cars can you drive, and how many? I'm not gonna
There are
I'm not
so
gonna
there
go any deeper into how many or how much
the
or what you can do, but
the
I've done a
amount
lot
of
of
things
things.
that you
Point is,
can learn and
hold on,
do.
hear me out. I've done a lot of fun stuff, and the issue is that it becomes decreasingly rewarding.
I don't know about that.
I
I
do.
find a lot of enjoyment trying and learning new things, and there is so much in this world that I have not seen and I have not experienced that I hope to be able to one day. And a lot of those things to learn and experience are going to come at the cost of money, of being able to travel somewhere or whatever. But like,
So what I'm kind of looking at some of these points that I have here, and what I'm realizing is that a lot of these points aren't things that you realize until after you have kids, which obviously makes somebody in your position who has had kids yet, it's really difficult to see that, right? But
I've
like,
been told this before. One of my
and
best friends in Charleston was talking about having kids, and he's like, "Look, you you won't understand how much better they make your life until you have them." And I said, "I'm happy to let you be right and not find out for myself."
and again, I don't pressure you to have children. I'm just saying your perception needs to have the empathy and understanding of kind of this other aspect. So what I have here is kind of, so this isn't my idea. This is an idea. Social connections. Having children expands your social networks and connecting with other parents and family in the communities, which I've thought about for a while. I'm like, damn, it'd be nice if I had a weekend where like I could drop this kid off at his friend's house and he'd be able to like, he's a little young for that still, but like at some point I'll be able to drop. And I'm always like sizing up the other parents in daycare. I'm like, oh yeah, that little dork's parents are also dorks. All right, I hope my son's not friends with with this kid. Like I don't want to hang out with these
See,
guys.
I can avoid all of that petty bullshit.
um, yeah, but also if I got like a weekend where he gets to spend it like on somebody else's house, like that would also kind of be cool. I'm the argument I'm making for having kids is that I can send them away for a weekend. But I'm sure, like for your parents or my parents, and we would spend time at each other's houses. Like that was a nice time for them. All right, innovation and progress. Children represent the future. Raising them well contributes to societal progress, innovation, but you also get to partake in that progress. Like they're doing math way differently than we did math.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've heard that I've seen some of like the math questions that people post, and I'm like, this is stupid.
Yeah, well, but point is like you're kind of, one, you're re-exposed to things you already learned, and then two, you're exposed to things that are new to you, and a new way of doing math. I actually think any new way of learning the fundamentals, if you already know the fundamentals, is probably bad, right? Like because you should never be thinking about the fundamentals, right? It should just be something that's like part of you, and having to relearn the fundamentals, I think, is really challenging as an adult. But being able to be re-exposed to things is good. It's good for your kind of understanding. Um, and learning new things as your children learn things that you did not, I think is also uh, pretty cool.
I mean, I will. This is one of the few arguments you're making that I'm going to buy, which is that like at a certain level, society does need to have children, and raising those children well will lead to the next generation of people that will be scientists and engineers and politicians and writers and artists that will make society better. So I actually do buy that argument. And when I look at it that way, I say if this is so important to society, and I'll get to this if we have time, is why do governments not subsidize and encourage at a policy level people having children more than they do?
Well, because it's a slippery slope in terms of encouraging people to have children. Is that
Yeah, but again, this comes back to the quote of the incentive and the result is I don't feel like society incentivizes having kids. If there were more of an incentive for me to have kids, I
well?
would be more open to the
I
topic.
completely agree. Society does not incentivize having children, which is why societies overall, the more advanced the society is, all first world developed nations are seeing a decline. We saw it first happen in Japan and then a couple of other Asian countries. Um, and some of it was societal, and then some of it was like China, where they limited the number of kids that you could have. Which is I mean, you could look at that as I was going to say as far away from liberalism and democracy as possible, or though Republicans would say liberals are communists. So depends on which angle you take on that. What do you want to hit next here? You want me to keep hitting you with my points as to why you have kids and you play defense, or you want to kind of switch the turf here?
Well, I mean, this is probably my least convincing argument, but I just like, and this is
Like that's
touching on where you're going, which is like the non-economic rewards children provide are contingent at best.
well, you can have a bad kid. So Jordan Peterson says, and I'm falling out of love with Jordan Peterson, by the
That's
way.
good. You're a little late to the party, but I'm glad you're here.
I still think he says a lot of good stuff.
He
But what he
doesn't.
says is that parents' duty with a child is to make them likable, to make them a likable person. And that's good parenting, is to make a likable kid. Now, if you're not a great parent, you will bring a kid into this world who is not likable, and they will not bring value to your life, and they will not bring value to society. So, as a parent, that's your duty, and I think you'd probably agree on this. Like, as a parent, like if you have one duty that's tied to being a parent, one parental duty, like what would it, obviously the survival of of the child, right? But like what else could you think of that would be like a top tier duty? Making a likable human, I think would be high on that list.
Yeah, I mean being likable as a person has tremendous value, and like I don't. Real quick, just to go into politics just a little bit. I don't know if you've seen anything from Tim Walz since he was announced as the VP candidate,
A little bit.
but I've watched some of his appearances. I've watched some of his videos. I've watched some of his speeches, and the number one thing that stands out to me is that he just seems likable. He seems friendly and genuine, and there is so much there's so much value to just being likable. People will do things to help likable people.
That's yeah. So there's a weird thing about being likable. I talk about this all the time in sales training. There's a weird thing about being likable, that people will do things for you. Um, and even if they don't want to, even if they disagree with you, they will do things. Like if people like you and you're like in a store and you want to get ahead of them in line, but for whatever reason, they like you do something that is, I don't know, endearing or whatever the word I'm looking for is, and they decide that they like you, they'll just let you do whatever. Like if you walk into a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan, it's got a line going out the door, and you're like, "Hey, I got a meeting, I got an interview this morning. I'm really, I'm really trying to impress the boss. Is there any way I could just, and because whatever reason they can relate, and which makes you likable, to the interview and the impressing and the hustle that you're putting in and kind of jumping in and asking, providing you're dressed nicely. You're not a hobo, because that's a big turnoff for people in New York, because hobos and crazy drug addicts are always asking for favors. But if they can see some version of themselves in you, which is also a likable characteristic, they'll be like, yeah, please go ahead. And they'll fucking buy your coffee for you, which is like wild. They're like, no, I got this. Go to your interview. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. You got a whole fucking store full of people that got your back. So there's a major. I don't know much about Tim Walz. I don't. We can talk about him in another podcast.
Yeah, I
Last
don't want to get into it. I just want to talk about like what I've seen of him so far is that he seems likable, and that's of tremendous value. And that applies not just in politics, that applies in life entirely.
So I would like to just note that most of the viewers right now, and the predominant number. I mean, we got I don't know 4 dozen. We got almost 50 comments, kind of on one or two platforms alone. We're not monitoring. By the way, we don't monitor TikTok and Instagram comments. We got Rosh, who feeds us your comments on Instagram. But if you're on uh, Twitter or X, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, we can see your comments. So those are the places to go where you can also subscribe. We can see your comments on those platforms. But it's all women. I don't think I've seen it. I saw it initially on a one-on-one training. I think was a guy. I'm sorry. If you're not a guy, one-on-one training academy. I forget if you're a dog training academy or personal training academy. But I thought you were a man. I forget the company names. Thank you, Blocks. See you tomorrow morning. Thanks, Caitlin. Next point, James. Oh, we got Chance Hadid here. I'd love Chance's opinion on whether it's worth having children or not.
All right. Real quick, and this is one that you could talk about.
All right.
Taking care of children is unpleasant.
All right. So did we? I don't think we talked about this on air. The Sunday
Nope.
that you and I spent, you came into town, you stayed for the weekend. We spent a Sunday together. And the way that I remember this Sunday is we woke up, we had to take care of this kid. So we had to take care of the kid for the day. And we cooked this kid food, and he didn't eat any of the food, right? Right? We cooked like chicken tenders or something. He didn't eat any chicken tenders.
Yeah, look, we're strapped on time, so we got to be quick with this.
I'll try. Dude, I don't fucking remember any of this. So basically, we went outside. We're trying to watch a soccer game. This kid was kind of running all around, eating dirt, kept trying to pull him away from the dirt. Then he like went over to the grill. He was playing by the grill, and all of a sudden, he just came back and was crying. And I like picked him up. I'm like, oh, what's the matter? He stopped crying. We went inside because he was crying outside or eating dirt, either crying or eating dirt. So he couldn't be outside, and also you couldn't see the soccer game outside. So we went inside, put the soccer game on the TV. And then I was like, all right, I got to get this kid to eat some food. So I gave him like a pack of like blended fruit or something. There's probably a name for this pack of blended fruit. Us adults don't have a word for it, but it's a kid food. And he ate it. I was like, oh shit, great. He finally got some calories in his body. So I gave him another one. And then he's sitting on the sofa. He had two of these. He's kind of chewing on the cap of the second one, watching the golf game with us. And all of a sudden he starts gagging and then just fucking blows chunks and threw up both packs of all the food that he ate. I'm like, oh fuck. Like I finally got some calories in this kid, and then he puked it all over the couch. The fucking white sofa. Puked it all over the white sofa. So I run into the kitchen to just like instinct hits me. I run into the kitchen, grab like 6 paper towels, come running back in the living room. And as I am coming into the living room, I round the corner and I realize this kid has jumped off the sofa. He's got like a little puke on his chin, a little puke on his shirt, and he has moved one sofa cushion down, and he is arms outstretched towards my beer. Now I make the calculation and realize I am not close enough to catch this kid before he grabs my beer, and I watch him as I'm sprinting grab my beer, which is full, by the way. Grab my beer.
Yeah, and like a freshman at their first like fraternity orientation.
Just kind of top over, bottom over. That spilled. I thought that was. Whoops. He just bottom over top. He pours that beer all over himself. So at this point, I have a kid that just puked his guts out, is now covered in beer. He didn't drink the beer. All right, don't call Child Protective Services on it. He didn't drink the beer, and he's just covered in beer. I got to change his clothes. I got to clean this up. And then as I'm changing his clothes, I realize that he's got this kind of bullseye mark on the back of his neck.
Oh, yeah, from the bee sting from earlier.
Why was he crying outside? He got stuck. He got stung by a bee outside the house. We were sitting there. We didn't see any bees. And he got fucking stung by a bee. And then there's more to the story. It gets even worse.
Yeah, well, that's like this is a 15-minute story that we need to boil down to 3. But basically, I just like my list is like, yeah, changing diapers sucks. Cleaning up after them, cleaning them up and cleaning up after them. You lose all sorts of sleep. You can talk about how much sleep you've lost in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
Like the messes they make, they break things, they get sick. Like
but
you have to deal with terrible children's media, which you were talking about before the
yeah, I wish we had this
podcast.
conversation. I wish we had this conversation on air.
Like
About,
helping them with homework, dealing with school issues, like, and then like, and this plays right into my next point, which is like the major sacrifices of time and energy of dealing with their school stuff, like driving them to and from
okay,
activities,
I got you
taking
on that.
time to play and
I
engage
got
with
you
the
on that.
kids. Like this is a huge sacrifice, man.
Do you know how much time over the last decade and a half I have spent doing bullshitty things?
You know how much time I spent today doing bullshitty things?
How much?
Probably about 6 or 7 hours.
All right. What's the return on investment in you playing pool for 4 hours, or
I get
drinking,
better at pool.
or doing a exactly, or doing a podcast? Obviously, this podcast has very little return on investment. Visit
Well, hold
SipTalkPodcast.com
on.
and buy
The
some
answer
drink.
to
God
the
sake.
real answer to those questions are they are activities that I enjoy.
Okay, so but here's the issue with having a child. You're changing diapers, you're cleaning them up, you're not sleeping. But oddly, just like hang around the pool table, being shitty at pool makes you like pool more and get better at pool. Actually, change the order of that: get better at pool and then like pool more. So, also on this note, you may not know this. As a new parent, when you first have a child that starts to shit himself, because that's how
I would imagine they start that on day 1.
children don't shit themselves. Maybe it depends. Maybe day 2 or 3, but children don't shit them. Babies don't shit them. They're not potty. They don't come out potty trained. You can't put them in school before you send them home. They come out not potty trained. The shit doesn't smell. So you like, and it also doesn't look like shit. So you kind of like get induced into this like changing the diapers, dealing with the shit. It doesn't smell. And then it like starts to get a smell, but it's not like shit. And it doesn't look like shit exactly. And then like a month down the line, it kind of gets a little smellier, but it still doesn't look like shit. But you're also like excited. You're happy the kid is shitting because the regularity of their bowel movements is actually really important. So you actually get happy when they shit. And then it's like month 2 or 3 where it actually starts to like really smell like shit. And then kind of once they start eating real food, month 3 or 4 or down the line, their shit starts to look like shit and smell like shit and become actual shit. Then but at this point you've spent months kind of being groomed to deal with shit. It's not that big of a deal. And you get sucked into this being comfortable with shit.
Yeah, that just
And tell
that
me if
sounds
you're a parent
terrible.
and you're listening to me, tell me I'm fucking wrong on this.
That
It's
I
totally true, and
well,
it cut me
I
because
mean,
I didn't want to. I didn't want to.
I
Hold
can't
hold
tell
on,
you
hear me
you're
out.
wrong because I've
Hear me
never
out.
changed a diaper,
Hear
and
me
one
out.
of my
Hear me out.
life goals is to keep that streak alive.
Hear me out. I have pushed back on pet ownership, especially in New York City. So you grew up with pets, and we had lots of land, so the pets would just go out and shit wherever. But um, uh, I never had to pick up dog shit like they do in New York City, where you have a millimeter or 2 millimeter barrier between your hand and the warm, fresh dog shit that you have to pick it up with a plastic bag and throw it in the garbage. To me, that sounds fucking disgusting. We've talked about this before in the podcast. I am not cool with dog shit. However, I am totally comfortable with baby shit. So, so fucked. um, all right. Next note.
Next note. All right, so government policies don't encourage having children. An easy one is that, like in the United States, there's no laws on the books guaranteeing paid family leave.
Yeah, yeah. I will.
Any paid family leave is voluntary by the company that offers it. It's not required by law.
There are some cities actually that require it for the companies that operate there, like New York
Well,
City.
possibly, yeah. You might have local laws, but at the
Yeah,
federal level, we as a society don't require it.
yeah. It's weird because it's wild to me because kind of for civilization to continue, people must continue having children. A couple must have 2 children, kind of minimum for a population rate to stay the same. We actually haven't talked about any of these kind of metrics. Like for the population to stay the same, everybody
2.1.
everybody has to have 2 kids or 2.1, but arguably 2 kids. So that's for population to stay the same. So I actually they have predicted that we were going to get to 10 million, 10 billion, and then see a pretty steep decline back down to like 3 billion. I forget where this came from.
That'll be interesting times.
That'll be a fucking wild time. I actually think um, we're kind of already hitting the decline, and it won't be so steep. I think we might go from like 8 point something billion. I don't think we'll quite make it to nine, and then it might drop back down to like 5 or 6, uh,
Hmm.
and then
I don't
stay.
know.
But we'll see where the developing nations would happen, because the developing nations will be the ones carrying the birth rates.
Real quick. All right. So I want to modern life is not conducive to raising children. And so you can talk about this. Like, it's difficult to raise a child with two working parents because of time constraints.
Mhm.
And you can also look at, like, it's hard to focus on raising a child and also focus on having a successful career because both of those are very time intensive. And there's actually, like, this is much more true for women than men, but like women that have children have significantly reduced lifetime earning potential. And the statistics bear this out where like I think
Listen,
women that have children, it's something like 51% decline if they have children because a lot of women will either leave the workforce because they had a child or reduce the amount of hours that they work or they're more likely to take time off of work which is less time that they have to build up their career. So that's another major sacrifice that
well,
it can file under the
Right.
economic
You
thing.
hit a lot of points here. You hit a lot of points. I want to kind of touch on them, at least with my thoughts. So, um, let's talk about women being less employable because they don't work as much because they have children. So that's kind of an intrinsic flaw in humanity, right? Like, if you have the option to hire a man who's going to work,
Yeah, it's just a design defect.
I mean, it is. If you can hire a man who's going to work 308 days a year, versus a woman who is going to work 308 days some years and then 200 days other years, like, who would you rather hire? At a simple, I'm not like, let's not account for like you supporting women. I'm just saying, like, you got a McDonald's, right? And you got to get the French fries of the people, and you have one employee who works 308 days. You have another employee that works 230 days, but you have to pay them the same amount. Simple economics would say you hire the man. All right. Now, the issue is that our society isn't, maybe in like Sweden or kind of that region. Uh, our society isn't to the point where we just decide we're going to just randomly decide to pay this woman for the 308 days at a federal level. Like, as a country, we're not there. There are other countries that are there, and there are cities within the United States that are there. But you have to understand that you're paying somebody for time they're not working. You're paying someone for time that they're sleeping. You're paying someone for time where they're coddling their child. You're paying someone for time where they're breastfeeding. You're not
Yeah,
you're not
basically you're
paying them to
paying
make french
someone
fries.
you're paying someone time when they're not economically productive. And the
Exactly.
argument could be made that their economic production is by having another child which will provide future economic production, but that's kind of
But
weak.
but it's not a weak argument when you think of the full circle of things. It's a very real argument, and that's where the short-sightedness falls, right? So, like, when you're running a business, you're not thinking 40 years in the future or 18 or 16 years in the future. You're thinking, like, can I afford to pay this person 80 grand a year when they work two-thirds as much as the guy? Right? Like, can I afford to pay this person 80 grand and their and health benefits? So, like, as somebody who's employed people before and been like, yo, this person wants to take a vacation every fucking, couple of months, versus this person who will just dive into this and never take a vacation. I want the person that would never take a vacation. Now, if that vacation is childbirth, I'm like, oh, what's my moral right to society? you know, which is like a way deeper argument to make. Should I pay this person while they're just not here? Because it means my small business is going to have to hire another person to do the job while they are sleeping, breastfeeding, coddling, throwing up in the toilet, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what happens.
Yep.
And it's wild to think, especially from it's totally simple to think from a giant business perspective, right? Like, it's your duty, you got to pay these people. But from a small business perspective, can that small business survive having half your work staff who could potentially be out every other year, one third of the year?
Yep.
All right. And I'm not, all right. I want to introduce this week's Bart Trivia question before we run out of time. Bart Trivia question, episode 254. Even if they are starving, natives in the Arctic will never eat a penguin's egg. Why not? Why do natives in the Arctic not eat penguin eggs, even if they were starving?
I know why.
I do too. Um, Listen, guys, it takes me a long time to brainstorm over these Bart trivia questions. So if you want to answer us, you want the prize, we'll send you some merch. You can visit siptalkpodcast.com. Actually, check out the merch. We got some bar glasses, we got some mugs, we got some shirts, we got some dog shirts, we got some baby onesies. Speaking of babies, we got some towels. We got a lot of cool merch. But it looks like we are out of time, James. I feel like this is maybe a two-part episode. I don't know, but
It might have to be. It's like a 1.5 part episode.
but this is the end of the episode. James, maybe we hang out a little bit. Raj, if you want to
Yeah.
jump back on. But
You know what I think? Is I
yeah,
think the next episode we talk
hold
about
on.
like,
We're out of time. The
damn it.
music's pumping up. So I just want to say to everybody, thank you for joining. Visit SipTalkPodcast.com. All right, you made it this far. Do you agree with one of us over the other one? Let me know in the comments whether or not you think it's worth having kids.